The park was unusually quiet that day. The sun beat down mercilessly on the flagpole in the center of the Veterans Memorial, its rays casting long shadows across the stone plaques inscribed with names of the fallen. A gentle breeze stirred the flags, their flapping the only sound breaking the stillness. Sergeant Matthew Rourke stood beneath the pole, his right hand raised in a crisp salute. His Marine dress blues were immaculate, the uniform's deep blue and red a stark contrast to his prosthetic leg and the scars running up his left arm. His face was a mask of determination, his gaze unwavering as he stared at the flag. Matthew had been standing there for over an hour. Sweat dripped down his temple, soaking into his collar, but he didn't move. To the handful of passersby who noticed him, the scene was both inspiring and puzzling. What could compel a man to stand so still, enduring such visible pain? As the minutes ticked by, Matthew's thoughts drifted to the past, to the day that had changed his life forever. It had been a routine patrol, or so they thought. His unit was moving through a quiet valley in Afghanistan when the explosion ripped through the ground beneath them. The ambush was swift and brutal. By the time the dust settled, 5 of his brothers were gone. Matthew had barely survived, losing his leg and nearly his life. Today was their anniversary. Every year, Matthew honored their memory by holding a 3-hour salute, 1 hour for each man lost. It was his way of showing that their sacrifices would never be forgotten. But this year, the weight felt heavier. His body was weaker, his scars aching more than usual. Still, he refused to let go. A little boy in a red baseball cap was the first to stop. He tugged on his mother's sleeve, pointing at the Marine. "Mom, why is he standing like that?" His mother smiled gently, kneeling down to his level. "He's a Marine, sweetheart. He's saluting the flag to honor someone." "Who?" the boy asked. The mother glanced at Matthew, her smile fading as she noticed his scars and the prosthetic leg. "I don't know, but whoever it is, they must be very important." Others began to notice. A man walking his dog paused, tipping his cap respectfully. An elderly woman placed her hand over her heart as she stood at a distance. Slowly, a small group formed, whispering amongst themselves but keeping a respectful distance. The deep rumble of engines shattered the quiet reverence. Heads turned as a group of motorcyclists rolled into the park, their leather jackets and roaring bikes an almost jarring contrast to the solemn scene. They parked their motorcycles near the memorial, the leader dismounting first. He was a tall, burly man with a thick beard and sunglasses. His jacket bore patches that read, "Iron Brotherhood MC" and "Vietnam Veteran." The bikers surveyed the scene, their expressions unreadable. One of them, a younger man with tattoos covering his arms, muttered, "What's going on here?" The leader removed his sunglasses, squinting toward the Marine. "Looks like a brother standing watch." As the bikers approached, some members of the crowd stiffened. The bikers' rough appearance made them seem out of place, their presence almost threatening. But their actions told a different story. One biker placed a folded American flag at the base of the flagpole. Another handed out bottles of water to the growing crowd, offering quiet words of explanation. "He's honoring his brothers," one of them said. "We're here to honor him." The leader of the bikers stepped closer to Matthew, standing just behind him. He didn't say a word, simply watching with a solemn respect. As the 3rd hour approached, Matthew's body began to betray him. His arm trembled, the strain of holding the salute for so long becoming unbearable. His prosthetic leg ached, the weight of his memories and the pain of his injuries pushing him to his limits. He blinked against the sweat dripping into his eyes, his vision blurring. For a moment, he thought he might collapse. The biker leader stepped forward. "Marine," he said, his voice steady, "we've got your 6." Without waiting for a response, the leader raised his hand in salute. One by one, the other bikers followed, their leather-clad arms snapping into position. The sight was powerful, men of all ages and backgrounds standing in solidarity. The crowd erupted into applause, some wiping away tears as they watched the bikers and the Marine hold their salute together. Matthew's hand shook violently as he struggled to maintain his salute. The pain in his arm was excruciating. The prosthetic leg felt like an iron weight pulling him down, and his vision blurred from dehydration. Yet he held firm. His brothers in arms had endured worse. They hadn't quit, so neither would he. But the weight of loss, the grief he carried every day, suddenly felt unbearable. His knees wobbled, and his posture faltered for the first time in nearly 3 hours. It was then that the leader of the bikers, still standing silently in the crowd, moved with quiet determination. His heavy boots thudded softly against the pavement as he walked toward Matthew. The moment was charged with tension. Some onlookers murmured, unsure of his intentions. He stopped a foot away from the Marine, squaring his broad shoulders and pulling off his leather jacket. The patches on his vest were weathered, each one a marker of battles fought and lost. He raised his right hand in a perfect salute. The silence in the park deepened as every other biker followed suit, their faces solemn and resolute. The leader's gravelly voice broke the stillness. "Marine," he said, his words carrying the weight of decades of service. "You're not alone. We've got your six." Matthew blinked, his vision swimming, but the sight of those salutes steadied him. He could feel the strength radiating from these men, strangers who now stood shoulder to shoulder with him in an unspoken bond. Tears welled in his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. Instead, he straightened his posture, feeding off their support to finish what he had started. The bikers' salutes were precise, practiced. Among them were patches from different wars and conflicts: Vietnam, Desert Storm, Iraq, Afghanistan. Each man had carried his own burdens, and now they stood united with Matthew, holding him up in spirit when his body threatened to give out. The crowd watched in awe, many with tears streaming down their faces. A young girl clutched her mother's hand, whispering, "Mom, why are they all saluting?" "Because that Marine," her mother replied, her voice trembling, "reminds them of everything they've fought for, and they're reminding him he doesn't have to carry it alone." The gesture spread like wildfire. One by one, the onlookers began raising their hands. A construction worker still wearing his safety vest. A teenage boy with earbuds dangling from his neck. A woman in a business suit who dropped her briefcase to stand at attention. Even the local news crew, cameras still rolling, placed their hands over their hearts in respect. It wasn't just a salute anymore. It was a statement, a collective acknowledgement of sacrifice, of solidarity, and of the unbreakable bond between those who serve and the communities they protect. Matthew's arm trembled one last time before he lowered it in a crisp motion. His 3-hour vigil complete. The crowd erupted into applause and cheers, the sound reverberating across the park like thunder. The moment Matthew's arm dropped, his knees buckled, and he collapsed toward the ground. But before he could hit the pavement, the biker leader caught him, his strong arms steadying the Marine with the ease of someone who had done this many times before. "You held your ground, Marine," the leader said, his voice thick with emotion. "You did them proud." Matthew's breathing was labored, but his eyes locked onto the man holding him. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice raw. I couldn't have done it alone." "You never have to," the biker said firmly, helping him to a nearby bench. As Matthew sank onto the cool metal, the weight of his exhaustion finally settled over him. Sweat dripped from his brow, and his hands trembled as he accepted a bottle of water from another biker. He drank slowly, his throat parched, but his heart was full. The leader crouched in front of him, pulling a small patch from his jacket pocket. It bore the emblem of the Iron Brotherhood MC, along with the words honor, courage, brotherhood. He placed it in Matthew's hand, folding his fingers over it. "This," he said, "isn't just a patch. It's a promise. You're one of us now, And no matter where you are, no matter what you're going through, we've got your back. Always. Matthew stared at the patch, his vision blurring again. Not from dehydration this time, but from the surge of emotion threatening to overwhelm him. He thought of his brothers, the ones he had lost in that ambush, and for the first time, the crushing guilt that had haunted him for years began to lift. He wasn't alone anymore. He hadn't been forgotten. The bikers lingered as the crowd slowly began to disperse. A few onlookers approached Matthew, shaking his hand or placing a gentle pat on his shoulder. "Thank you for your service," a woman said softly, her eyes glistening with tears. A teenage boy in a baseball cap stepped forward next. "You're a hero," he said, his voice shy but earnest. The local news anchor, microphone in hand, tried to approach for an interview, but the biker leader stepped in with a firm shake of his head. "Not today," he said. "This moment isn't for cameras." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the park emptied, leaving only Matthew, the bikers, and the fading warmth of the day. The leader lit a cigar, offering one to Matthew, who chuckled softly and shook his head. "I'll stick to water, thanks." The leader smiled, sitting beside him. "Suit yourself. But let me tell you something, Marine. What you did today, it mattered, not just to the ones you lost, but to everyone here. You reminded them what it means to stand for something." Matthew nodded, his throat tightening again. I didn't want them to be forgotten." "They won't be," the leader replied, "because of you." As the bikers mounted their motorcycles and roared away into the night, Matthew sat alone on the bench, staring up at the flag still rippling in the evening breeze. For the first time in years, the weight on his chest felt lighter. The faces of his brothers, Nick, Ortiz, Ramirez, Jensen, and Halstead, flashed in his mind. He could almost hear their voices, laughing, teasing, telling him it was okay to move forward. He gripped the patch in his hand tightly, the words honor, courage, brotherhood catching the last rays of sunlight. He wasn't just saluting the flag anymore. He was saluting the bond he had rediscovered, the new brothers who had reminded him that strength wasn't about standing alone. It was about standing together. With the flag still flying high above him, Matthew rose to his feet. His leg ached, his scars burned, but his heart felt whole. As he walked back to his car, the echoes of the day stayed with him. He wasn't alone. He never would be.